Good morning. I would like to talk this morning about participation mystique. Participation mystique is a capacity possessed by primitive peoples to merge with nature and being. We have lost this capacity almost entirely in the modern world. Loss of the ability to merge with the greater life around us is the core illness of our times. It is so universal that it is invisible to us. Consensus reality in the culture omits being entirely. It explains consciousness as a brain function, the Lataif aspects as emotions in the individual, and identifies the ego as the self. With no place in our framework for the core knowledge of being, the entire culture is suffering from crystallized ego. Identity which is locked in ego as a separate entity. Crystallized ego is considered to be a rare pathological condition which requires extreme practices to break down in the East. In our society, crystallized ego is the norm. We are cut off from our source, being, and all of its gifts. Trapped in crystallized ego and without the solidity and fullness of being available, we feel hopeless, threatened, empty, and superficial. We are all ill from loss of being and suffering from a pandemic of despair. Participation mystique is a term taken from French anthropologist Lévi-Breuil. He used the term to refer to the capacity of indigenous peoples to merge with nature so that they sense the living quality of their environment. We once possessed this faculty in the West. Now it is largely atrophied, and we must relearn to perceive being. Since the Western framework omits being, we rarely experience it naturally and spontaneously. In a setting of natural beauty, some people in the West are still able to experience a vast, deep presence in nature. With no context or understanding of being, they define their experience as a simple affinity for nature. In a way, this is true. The presence of being and the presence of nature are one and the same. Being, however, is vaster, deeper, and more mysterious than the plants, rocks, rivers, forests, and mountains of the earth. The ancient sensitivity to living presence is still there inside of us, though deadened under modern layers of skepticism, rationality, analysis, and materialism. Sensing being in nature involves perceiving an additional layer of existence, a layer of invisible presence and livingness infusing the objects of the natural landscape. We simultaneously perceive both the natural landscape and the invisible livingness of being. Perception moves from one layer to the other. They are separate layers of reality, yet co-emergent. The roots of this experience are in mystical vision, which may be defined as looking deeply into the heart of truth. Another way to perceive being is with the cells of the body, not with the mind. The mind is there to register the experience, of course, but the sensual experience of being is generated in the living tissues of the body. It is as though the cells turn outward and sense into the world for presence. It is subtle and usually overlooked, but it is definitely there. We can call it the presence of being, the presence of living consciousness, or the presence of the ocean of dynamic awareness. It is beyond our capacity to understand it, but we can sense it and fully sense its living existence. Most psychological problems are spiritual problems at base. Perceiving that we live in an empty, unintelligent, and uncaring universe is enough to make a strong person ill with existential despair. This perception is a major source of pain and suffering in most people. Both individuals and the society at large are suffering as a result of it. The experience of participation mystique, emerging with a greater reality, could be a healing for this. Levi Bruhl defined participation mystique as a relationship wherein a person cannot distinguish himself as separate from the object or thing they behold. Levi Bruhl used the term in describing the mental processes and states of Paleolithic man. The term has also been used to describe tribal or ethnic consciousness in later times. In this experience, the mind steps away from the separateness of the ego for a time and merges with another, larger, and invisible reality, experiencing there what it can experience in no other form of consciousness, and bringing the experiences back to consensual reality. One can merge with nature, with a story and its characters, with unseen being, with animals, with vegetation, with rocks, with other humans, and so on. The capacity to merge is innate. Children up to the age of 7 do it fully and often. After 7, it is socialized out of them or lost in the unfolding development of the mind. The experience of merging and unmerging is a central capacity of humans and a part of all of our lives. However, although we experience it daily and are familiar with its effects, it goes unnoticed because it contradicts the cultural complex that tells us we are separate. Separateness, if it were true, would preclude this mysterious merger. So, although it is part of our lives and ordinary experience, it is not part of our awareness, and it occurs most often beneath the threshold of consciousness. Merger with unmanifest being is the core of Sa'ada, defined as nearness to being. Lack of merger, or separateness, is the core of Shaka, defined as far from being. Similarly, merger with being creates a state of magic or enchantment. Lack of merger is a state of disenchantment. Buddhists refer to this latter state as the hungry ghost. To re-enchant is to merge with being. The qualities of being are then accessible and flow through the nervous system so that the entire organism is energized, uplifted, supported, and in contact. It is a state of immense well-being. Humans are full of longings. The core longing, however, is the longing for contact and merger with the living, unmanifest field of being. It is the source of all of our experiences of meaning, depth, and sacredness. Without access to these experiences, life quickly becomes trivial, superficial, and pointless. The impulse toward merger with being is constant and unending, since upon it depends the entire quality of one's life. When this vital experience is withheld, the human being usually begins to claw at the world, desperately seeking the gifts of merger with being, but finding only inadequate substitutes. Gluttony for material, goods, fame, and attention are the substitutes usually sought in our society. However, the substitutes never work to ease the craving. They cannot suffice. Only the real experience of contact and merger with real living being can satisfy the thirst. Gluttony and materialism are born out of the inability to experience merger with being. This is the normal state of most human beings in our culture today. The integration of the primary truths about reality is the healing. Space and the cosmos will then become full, rather than empty. They will become charged with intelligent, living being. Then one can perceive the cosmos as an ocean of livingness, unfolding itself infinitely and magnificently in its dynamism into a vast multiplicity of forms. One can see the world metamorphosing eternally out of the ground of its own deep nature. The world will then become re-enchanted, a place of magic, mystery, profound depth, and meaning. And finally, you will belong. You will belong to the whole strange, beautiful, and wondrous unfolding of the life of being. The cosmos, in all its dynamism and mystery, will finally become home.